back with another episode of the Branders Magazine Talking with Branders podcast. I'm your host, Steven Bacanza, and today in the studio, or probably like 8,000 miles away from his studio, is Jacob Cass. He's the founder of Just Creative, the co-host of the Just Branding podcast with our good friend and mate, Matt Davies. All-around good guy, and he's really just on a mission to help companies stand the flock out. So welcome, Jacob. Thanks for joining us today.
I love the energy. I'm not sure if I can match that. I'm a bit of a calm energy kind of guy, which you'll see, but we should balance each other out. I'm awesome. Thank you for having me. Let's talk brand.
Let's do it. And now that I realize that I'm obnoxious because you're like even keeled and I'm just like a New Yorker through and through. So for those who don't know who you are, they've been living under a rock for the last like 10 years. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your little elevator pitch.
All right. Well, yes, I'm from Australia. My name's Jacob Cass. I run Just Creative, which is a brand design agency based here in Sydney. It is also a industry-leading blog in the creative and design space. I run Just Branding, which is a podcast for branding professionals and entrepreneurs. I run a creative community for designers, helping them level up. And my bread and butter basically is branding. So I have a background in logo design, identity design, and more recently brand strategy. And I kind of love this cross-section of business, design, marketing, and everything that revolves around that. So that's where my passion lies. And I'm a bit of a flamingo enthusiast, which is where the stand the flock out comes from.
Flamingo, I don't think I've ever met anyone who's a flamingo enthusiast. Where did that come from?
Good question. I never knew how to kind of talk about the flamingo theme that my brand has, and this like flamingo enthusiast tag kind of opens that up. So my brand is pink. It has been since 2007 when I started. So it's always been part of the brand. But about a few years ago, I rebranded, helped one of my buddies at his gym rebrand his gym, and it had a mascot that was a lion. And I thought that was so bloody cool. I was like, what is my mascot? And I don't have one. I've never really thought about it. So I was like, the flamingo came up. And not just because it was pink, but it had a lot of the values that align with me, and standing out, obviously, balance, and being vibrant, fun, creative, a little bit kitschy as well. So it had all these values that kind of resonate with me. I'm a big beach guy. I love the tropics, and it just like fitted so perfectly. So, and it was pink, so it worked really, really well.
I mean, it's kind of like a unicorn that like
yes.
Game, and it sounds like everything that you are. That's amazing.
Yeah, totally. So I shared this on my socials, and it kind of took much more wind than I thought. And people started sending me flamingo themed gifts and like messages. I saw this, I saw that. And I was like, people are really associating me with flamingos. And yeah, I ended up creating a poster in the background here. And then I just got given gifts, cushions, clothes, more recently beer and gin, the good stuff. So it's just opened this whole world up, and now we're having a bit of fun with it, leaning into it for our brand. So you'll notice there's a 3D flamingo mascot with our brand Just Creative, and we have some taglines like "Stand the flock out" and "Let's flame and go," and we have a bit of fun with it. So that's where it came from, and yeah, it's a big part of our brand now. And we're actually going through the process of creating a animated version of this flamingo. Ooh. So it's really taking off, if you will, taking flight.
It's taking flight. I love when brands organically just kind of like, they don't force it, right? They don't force a mascot. They don't force a color or a certain differentiator that they think, right? Like it just kind of happens, and I've always been attracted to that. And the pink, it's funny. Years ago, I was living in San Diego, Jacob, and there was a realtor that I was working with. And she had mentioned to me that her biggest competitor used flamingos as their lawn signs
Mm.
for sale house for houses that were for sale. And she goes, kind of like what you were saying. She goes, I love that. It's vibrant, it's personable, it stands out, and it always stuck with me. So you're onto something, and like keep flamingoing on, I suppose you could say.
Thank you, mate. And there are some stories around where flamingos came from, and it was a bit of a status symbol where people did use them as like lawn elements to show that they weren't super, super well off, where they were pristine gardens. It was like we're going to have some fun here, and we don't mind putting flamingos in our garden. So it is about standing out.
It absolutely is about standing out, and I love it. So obviously that's like part of like your philosophy as a designer, right? You want to create Viz IDs, or you want to create logos or just brands that stand out. Has your philosophy though changed over the years? I mean, I know that you got started, a couple decades ago, like myself, and I know I've changed drastically, but like, how have you changed over the last couple of years?
Well, first off, it's standing out for the right reasons. That's the most important distinguisher here. And yes, you want to stand out, but you have to do that with a bit of strategy. So to do that, you have to look at a number of things, right? You have to look at your company, what you offer, what value you bring. You have to look at your customer and who you're going after and who you're targeting, but also the marketplace. How can you stand out against the marketplace, and how can you be, distinctive enough to stand out against all those things? And that's really what branding is about. It's like understanding how you can become the only choice in the eyes of the customer. And that's really how my philosophy is. I take it today. Earlier in my career, I didn't have much of a strategic approach. It was very brief driven, and you'd get the data from the customer, you'd fill out a questionnaire, and you go and execute. So that's how I did things early in my career. And it worked pretty well. I ran a logo design studio while traveling and doing the digital nomad thing for a number of years. And I didn't talk to clients. I had a form online. I got the brief and executed. And I was booked out for many years. I was only working 4 hours a day, but it was a system that really, really worked. But now my approach is much more holistic, and I spend much more time with the business owner, and I consider myself more of a partner with growing their business. So that's how things have changed more recently.
The brief. Oh, the brief. Oh, the effing brief. Having worked with big agencies and independent agencies and small shops, like everyone has their own outlook on the brief. But I really appreciate, and I think what you're getting at, Jacob, is an attribute that a lot of us branders do. Just innately, but like maybe we don't put enough emphasis on it. But like it seems to me like now you're listening, right? Like you use a term partner with your clients, right? And it's less about just talking at them and telling them, or just like deliver, like being so transactional, but like you're almost like reading between the lines. And I got
exactly.
Yep. How important is
perfectly
that
said. Yeah, listening, asking the right questions, understanding the root cause of what problem they're trying to solve, and going deeper. And that is about listening and asking the right questions. Absolutely. And yeah, it's not transactional, it's more transformational.
Oh, I like that, right? From transaction to transformation, from evolution to revolution. I love like the gamuts, right? Like putting shit on a spectrum.
Absolutely.
Young designers, and I see it now. I teach at a couple of universities, and having a pulse with the youth, right? They're all about shock and awe, I suppose you could say, right? Like for them, standing out is about being so radically different that it doesn't look, or just being so radically different. I'm just going to leave it at that. But it may not be strategically sound. What's your take?
No, it's a shame with social media that like the noisiest wins, right? Who can pump out the most content, and it doesn't always have to be tactful these days. It's about it's about value in the end, but there's also, everyone's chasing the algorithm, which means that you get so much of the same like junk, to be honest.
Yeah.
And we're in this like micro world where we're just getting, 15-second clips, and we're not really going deep, and we're not applying things. It's just like, doom scrolling. And I don't think that's for the better. I do think information and the availability of information online is great. However, you do have to have some tact to know where to focus and who to learn from, and where you want to grow, because otherwise you're just going to get drowned out by comparison, just endless scrolling and all that stuff that we're all guilty of.
You think about the mental health implications that had. I was having a conversation with like a couple strategists that I work with, and we were talking about just like putting the phone down, right? And like amazing, like when you can step outside and not be so attached to technology, how you can absorb the world around you, and you can hopefully, have heightened senses around the places that you're seeing, the things that you're looking at. But we're so just programmed, and it's so unfortunate. And I struggled with this having a young child. We were talking before we went live about kids, and like they're just growing up with phones in their hands. And I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was actually speaking to my coach, and she went on this 3-day no speaking, no doing retreat, and she was just sharing how this. I didn't do this, by the way. I'm not sure if I could survive this, but she was just sharing how it was meant to help you be, rather than just always been thinking and being doing. It's more about being in the moment and being present and putting everything down and allowing yourself to do that. And you try not to think. That's the aim of the retreat. And she was just sharing how hard it was to detach from that idea, because we're always on, we're always trying to do the next thing, we're always growing, which is in our nature, but it can be detrimental. So, taking a break and, going outside, like you said, is a big way to break that pattern.
Have you read the book Digital Detox from Cam Newport, I think it was?
I think I've heard the audiobook summary. So I don't really read too much these days. I do audiobooks or audiobook summaries.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I haven't, that one sounds familiar, but I do so many, read so many.
No, I totally get it. No, he talks about the notion of just like the benefits that we have from doing, like, putting, even if it's micro, right? Turning your phone off at 7 p.m. and not turning it on until 8 a.m. the next day, right? Just the benefits of not even having the phone in the bedroom with you, which we're all guilty of. And we all know it's the worst thing in the world for us, but we do it anyway because of the drug. And so,
yeah,
I don't know.
It's extra difficult being Australian, because when it gets around 7 o'clock, that's when everyone wakes up overseas, and most of my clients in the States. So you get a bunch of emails and a bunch of things come in when you're winding down. But if you don't respond, then you have to wait another 24 hours before you get enough. Yeah. So it's like this necessary evil, especially in the middle of the week when you're trying to get progress on projects and get fast email responses and everything. So there's that thing I kind of battle with as well. It's time zone differences.
That's really interesting, Jacob. Like, we live in this kind of borderless world, right? Like, everyone is working around the world, and we're able to have a conversation, and you're thousands upon thousands of miles from me. How do you go about, a brand comes to you and wants to create kind of a global entity, not necessarily an American brand or a North American brand, but they want to be able to be attractive to multiple, geographies. How do you go about managing those global aspirations for brands?
Well, to be honest, we're all global brands. The internet is borderless, so we can attract audiences all over the world. I generally start with my clients understanding who their ideal customers are, starting with one. And then I have this exercise well, if we're focusing on one, if we start marketing, who are we going to target? Who's this one ideal customer? And then the next is, well, what about 10? How do we split that up? We're going to do 5 here and 5 there. Oh, we're growing a little bit more. We're focusing on 100 people. We need to get 100 people in buying our product. Who are these 100 people? And you're just using, times 10. Right. So once you've hit that threshold of 100, it's well, now we're trying to hit 1,000. Where are we going to market? And how are we going to reach them? So this little exercise helps us define the individuals and gives us a little bit more focus in the beginning, rather than just having a water spray approach.
That's smart. I think sometimes business leaders have these aspirations that are huge, but get overwhelmed real quickly because their aspirations are huge, and you can't can't climb Mount Everest without training on the bunny hill first, right? So it's
Absolutely.
like conquering the pre-Alps before you get to the Alps. And I think that's really smart. And I think it helps brands. I've worked with brands where they've overextended, their product lines, or they just overextended too quickly. And you said that word focus, and that's so important. How much educating are you doing to your clients to kind of reel them in? Like, you are so creative, client, but shit, you got to reel it in and stay focused.
Well, everyone wants to focus. Well, everyone wants to target everyone. So that's the biggest problem. It's like, well, no, we're targeting everyone.
Right.
But yes, eventually. But in the beginning, you have to start small and you have to focus somewhere. So that's why we create these personas, and we create someone that we can at least have a rough idea on who to focus. So it is pulling them back or pulling them in to, let's have a chat about this, because we can't do it all. We have to have somewhere to start, and we grow. That's how tribes grow, and that's how, corporations are built. It's, slowly and surely with focus.
I had a podcast a couple of years ago called the Creative Hustler Podcast. And like you, were digital nomad. I was everywhere. It was amazing. And oftentimes I would go into like businesses on where I was and have that kind of similar conversation with them. It's about focusing and this notion of the journey of 1,000 steps begins with one single step, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Absolutely.
just kind of that's that quote. So my next question is related to my original podcast that I had called, and it was, I was so, and I'm still am so fascinated with how people, how creatives get inspired, right? It's such a thing for me, and like, I'm always searching for everyone else's answers to helpfully inspire me and how I get inspired. But like, what is an unexpected inspiration for Jacob Cass?
Inspiration. Well, I often go in like these roller coaster moments, and I do a lot. I'm a bit of a creative drifter, and it's a blessing and a curse. So I do a lot. Like when you introduced me, it's like I'm doing coaching, I'm podcasting, I'm doing client work, I'm helping in creatives, and it's like there's a lot of things, and it keeps things interesting for me, but it also delays the focus and the growth of these things. My version of success is having the freedom to do a variety of things, to have creative freedom. So it works for me, but I know that there's also a backlash for that as well. And I recently went through this. Well, I recently had this crossroads, and I reached out to a bunch of different people and just to share my thoughts on this, because it was getting to me. It's like, well, I'm doing so many things, but I'm not necessarily growing too fast, and things are like plateauing in certain areas. So I spoke to people, and some people are like, well, if you chase 2 rabbits, you catch none, right? And then I speak to someone else, and they're like, well, one of those rabbits, you could catch 1 rabbit, and that rabbit is variety. Like, it's a different perspective. So if you're catching that rabbit and you've defined what that is, then you can be more okay with it. And that frame of thinking got me a little bit more. That frame of thinking helped me, right? Not just having to always think about the problem of not focusing. It's like, well, you're doing what you want to be doing, and that's success, right? So in a roundabout way, I think it really comes down to your definition of success and what you want to get out of everything. So yeah, that's my little tangent.
As a creative entrepreneur, we bro, I totally I'm in the same boat as you. You use the term creative drifter. I actually wrote that down. I don't know if I've ever heard that term, or
I think I coined that a couple of months ago. I was like, that is literally me. I haven't heard it, but I need to put a little TM on that. But
yeah, no, I think you need to. I certainly have podcasts. I have my agency work. I have my consulting work. I got coaching work. I own a fucking studio in my town. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm doing all these things, but like that entrepreneur bug that a lot of us have, and I think a lot of creatives have, is we're all little serial entrepreneurs and, borderline insane. But I think it allows us to draw inspiration from just like the wildest, from the most obscure, I suppose you could say,
Mm.
instances. And I appreciate you sharing your moments in time with me right now.
Yeah, I actually didn't even answer your question. I kind of just drifted it. There you go again. Drifted off. But yeah, the inspiration it comes from whether or not I have clients, or if I want to focus on helping other creatives, or maybe I want to launch a digital product. It's like it just goes in waves and
Yeah.
depends on what I have on at the time. And sometimes I get bored of one thing, right? I've been blogging for since 2007, and I think it was about 6 years ago. I was like, I'm sick of this, and that's when I started growing a team, and that's scaled that up to like 10 people a couple of years ago. It's recently dropped back down, but it just changes. You go through these flows, and that's what inspires me. It's like, what's the next thing, and how can I keep things interesting? So that's kind of what inspires me is boredom.
That's what a great juxtaposition right
It is.
there. That is. I have a friend of mine, and he often talks about his entrepreneurs. He talks, and he won't consider himself a creative, but I think we're all creative in our own right, especially
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. But he also often talks about like getting something to the point where he has to blow it up. He has to blow it up for whatever reason, and it doesn't have to be a monumental blow up. It might just be making a quick pivot here, or bringing on a team to scale, or reeling back a team because you're getting bored of something. And I think that's so fascinating that you say that boredom, allows, is one of those things. Definitely something I'm going to reflect on, because I think you're striking a chord with me here, Jacob. So let's reverse this question a little bit. If you were to have a superpower as a designer, or as a strategist, as a branding guy or person, what might that be?
I wish I could set better goals. I talked to my coach about this, and like I'm not a goal setter, and I struggle with this because I just do things by intuition and gut feeling, and I don't set these lofty goals. It's like I've always done things just naturally, and opportunities come because of what you're doing. So I think for me, if I had a superpower, it would allow me to set goals and go after them and not get derailed by other shiny objects. As a creative, I do find myself doing that, and it's taken a while for me to like realize that and be self-aware with that. But I think it's just part of at least part of my DNA is to go off and drift between things, and that's I wish I did have a superpower around that.
I think we all did. You said self-awareness, right? Self-awareness is so important, especially in the line of business that we're in, because like we often need to like read between the lines, right? Even if we get a brief, right? Going back to the brief, like we still need to read between the lines of what the client might be asking for, or what they don't know how to articulate it. How important for branding people who are just entry level or just getting into the profession, how important do you rank like self-awareness versus like learning a hard skill like how to design? Like
I don't think you can get anywhere without some skill. That's the bare minimum. You need a foundation to work from, so you do have to have skills. Absolutely. What was the other thing you mentioned? Skills or
around self-awareness?
Self-awareness. Self-awareness helps definitely. I don't know how to they're different things. I'm not sure on this question, Steve. You kind of threw me a curveball.
I'm throwing myself for a loop here, because I think they like you, man. I think they're equally as important. I often think about like Donald Miller, right? And he wrote Story Brand. I'm sure you're familiar.
Yeah, and Here on a Mission. Great
Yeah,
books. I really enjoy his stuff.
Yeah, great stuff. I often think about kind of that two-part formula he has for brands, and it's like showing empathy while being equally authoritative, right? And like what a good like that's the unique balance to always try to achieve. So that always just gets me thinking about the next generation, right? The next generation of creatives, right? Will they have empathy, or are they just going to try to like kill us with authority? I've done this, I've done that, and I don't think there's a real question here. Just kind of throwing it out to the ether of like, what the hell is going to happen in the future? You know, with these new folks coming.
Yeah, with that framing, I do think self-awareness is equally important as the skills. And like you said, that balance between showing your authority, but also showing empathy and making the customer the hero and not you. That was a really big mindset shift for me when I learned about that. It's just like, well, your about page is not about you; it's about them, right? How you can help them. So that frame of thinking is like a total mindset shift, paradigm shift once you learn it. And I love his style where it says he simplifies everything to a T and just makes it the essentials. And that's brilliant. It's like Marty Neumeier's stuff. His books are just like no fluff. It's like, this is it. This is like so simple. You can read it, you understand it so quickly. And that takes a lot of time and effort to get something, so short and powerful. So I think it's the challenge we have as branders is like, we need to clarify, simplify, and send the right message very, succinctly to our audience. And that is a big challenge. Everything has to align. You have to know your company, your value. You have to know your customer and how to resonate with them. And you also have to stand out against everyone else in the marketplace to make sure that you connect better, or not necessarily better, but connect with the customer in a unique way that's going to resonate with them. So, yeah.
So spot on what you just said about simplification. Sometimes as strategists, branders, we get the perception is like more is like we need more research, more words, more this, more that to, I don't know, justify or to quantify our work, which is obviously such bullshit. When you think about the greatest strategies in the world, could just be 3 words and it moves the world, right? Like, and you brought up Marty, and you and I are both students of his. Every word matters in every one of his books, and like that to me is the most amazing thing, because I'm very much accusing. I am so guilty of just sometimes being so wordy that, like, I am my own worst enemy at times when I'm writing strategy. So like it's an exercise in self-control, right? It's an exercise in just making sure that, like, is it necessary? I think about the famous Marcus Aurelius quote, and he asks, like, is it necessary? Whatever you're doing, whatever you're saying, however you're acting, is it necessary? And reflect on that. And that's so profound, because simplifying a brand is our job.
Totally. Yeah. Another Donald Miller thing is the grunt test, right? Could a caveman, so if a caveman came across your site, could he grunt it out? Like, is it that simple that a caveman could like easily communicate it effectively?
I'm laughing because now I'm not calling my mother-in-law caveman, but my mother-in-law did look at me many years ago and say, Steven, tell me what you do like I'm a caveman. And like, that was really difficult back then. I didn't know. I was like, well, now it's much more clear, but back then it wasn't.
What do you say when someone says, what do you do?
Still, like, the issue becomes like you, Jacob. I'm a little bit of a creative drifter because I do a lot of things, but more often than not, I say that I build brand campaigns. Like, I help to build, because that more of my work recently has been that the work I'm doing with Dude Wipes and with Dr. Teal's and some of these other brands has been around just helping to translate the business goals to the creative brief and making sure that the creatives are able to create the best campaigns possible. I did comment, right? This happened actually yesterday on LinkedIn. Somebody said, so we're recording this right after Super Bowl. Somebody said on LinkedIn, what do you tell your kids when they're trying about the work that you do? Or something like that. And I said, In between, my 2-year-old sticky fingers trying to press the skip button on the YouTube app, I'm trying to let them know about the insight and the pull through of this campaign, but I never get there. So I just thought that was kind of funny. So commercials become the easy one too.
Totally. That's funny. My kids, I have 3 kids, they're 5, 3, and 1. And the 3-year-old, even when they were 2, actually, were picking up logos on cars. They're like, they see the T on the Tesla, and they're like, "That's an electric car." And they see the M on the highway, like that's McDonald's. So already from that young age, they understand symbols. So for me, it's like, well, Daddy designed them. So, and they're like, "Well, what's design?" And then it's a whole other conversation. So it's like, yeah. So that's how I communicated what I do in a simple way.
So this is an interesting question. I assume your office is at home. You have
Yep,
a home
I'm
office?
studio. Yep.
What's that balance like? 'Cause I'm struggling with 1 kid. You have 3 kids under the age of 5, and running all these different creative businesses. Like, how are you doing that?
Well, I'm fortunate enough to have a separate studio away from the house, and my wife works from home. So, and when I say work, I mean like tries to look after 3 kids, which is, I don't know how she does it. That's
Right.
harder than what I do. That's
Harder
for
than what we
sure.
do, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I literally have a schedule that I follow, and this is when I go to work. This is when I knock off, and I have a separate studio here. The one challenge I have is there's a pool right next to my studio, and they're often in there swimming when it's like hot and nice out, and I'm here tapping away. So that can be a little distracting, but I close the curtains, put my headphones on, and try not to think about that too much. But yeah, you just have to have some discipline.
I saw your setup in your brand video, and like I geek out on like offices. Like I have office envy because I love the fact that you have a pool and a separate building for your studio, and it's like, to me that's a dream come true. I don't have that now. I don't even have a home office. I just recently moved. My wife has a home office, and I have an office in town where I'm recording this. But like your setup seems just so sublime and serene.
Yeah, I love it. It's a bit of a, half my office here is behind me. It's like the play side. You got the PlayStation VR and everything, and then this side is the work side. And out on that side is the pool. And yeah, it's a great setup. We were very fortunate to find this place, and we went through so many places trying to find a suitable office that I could use for my work. Because I was going to work from home. I knew I didn't want to work for the man anymore. I had a taste of that freedom, and like that was my non-negotiable. So that's what we looked for when we moved in, and it worked out. But yeah, it's very fortunate.
Do you ever miss the camaraderie of an office?
I'm even at an office. I'm the one with the headphones in, like doing my work. I enjoy solo work, and I get my energy once or twice a week on weekends with big gatherings and things, and that's my outlet. So I prefer just to work solo, and I've always been like that.
You like to get into that flow state?
Yeah, I love the flow state, and I just do my thing. I've never really been a big socializer in work environments. Like I worked at an agency for about 5 years, and I was also I was the same way. Earphones in and only on meetings and stuff. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, it's quite the for a lot of us. And I see this trend now happening with agencies here in the States where they're requiring return to office for 2 days a week, 3 days a week. That's a hard thing for sometimes for creatives, right? Like, because you can't, especially after COVID, you get, used to it. You get used to this autonomy of working from home on your own accord. So be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah. But then I went to an agency here in Sydney recently, and you go in there and like there is the energy and there's the camaraderie, and like you miss that. But when I realized once I'm there, like it's only short lived, and it's you're there visiting and there's energy, but then you go back to work and
everyone puts their headphones on and just sits at their cubicle, and it's not It's not the same. Well, I'm just going to say I have complete office envy of you, and I'm just going to call it out for what it's worth. Last, I suppose, question before we close out. What's a dream project of yours that you would just love to work on?
Well, there was this time when I had the opportunity to design the livery for an airline. This was early in my career, and I got to, near the end of the rounds, and my work never ended up on the plane. So now I want to kind of relive that, or what's the word? Get some redemption for that project and work on an airline. That would be great to see some designs or like a logo on an airline.
Very Mad Men of you. Do you remember the episode of Mad Men back in the day? Where
I've shared this story, and someone else had this reference. I didn't watch all of Mad Men, so I don't remember.
I don't have no idea what season, no idea what episode, but Draper says at some point, like, you've made it when you've done an airline, a liquor brand, and a cigarette company. And he goes, like, that is creative branding nirvana if you could do one of those three. Well, cigarettes are out, and I've never worked on an airline, but I have done liquor, but I hope you get your airline one day.
Thank you, mate. And recently, like, another big thing for me was having the work on the Jumbotron at the Super Bowl. So that happened. So that was a big moment for me. So that was cool. And seeing you work in Times Square, that was another moment.
Yeah. And you also did the comedians in cars getting coffee.
Yeah, that's the same work. So that was on. So Jerry Seinfeld's show, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. I designed the logo and the branding for while I was at an agency in New York, and that has gone on to be on the Jumbotron for an ad for the show, and on bus stops around New York, and it's also been it's now on Netflix, and it's been streamed like over 100 million times. So that's a lot of exposure for your work, which is awesome. So it was definitely a big highlight for me. That was like over 10 years ago, though.
Show's been around that long.
Yeah.
Show is monumental. That show was a differentiating show because it kind of brought forward this kind of like not short form as in like a TikTok reel, but like these 10-minute micro episodes of just like star-studded power, and then you start.
They're longer than that. I think they're like 40 to an hour. At least they were for the first seasons. I haven't watched the last seasons, but they're pretty well produced, or extremely well produced episodes that literally does what the show name says.
Right, it's amazing, right? It's amazing what brevity does. Jacob, this has been an incredible conversation, but we do have to wrap up, unfortunately. So everyone listening, tell them your URLs, where you live on the internet, how they can get in touch with you.
Yep. So Jacob Cass is my name. My brand is Just Creative. So you can find all my links at justcreative.com. Not too just. Let me say that again. Justcreative.com. That's where you can find me. There is one huge bundle of goodies you can download on there for free. It's a bag. It's called a branding briefcase. It has a bunch of branding and design resources that you can download for free. It also includes my typeface called Just Sans, which is a #1 bestseller. You can get 2 free weights of that in there. It's a clean geometric sans serif, super nice. And things like a logo inspiration book, a brand strategy book, mock-ups for branding projects. It's all there for free. So obviously it's in exchange for your email, getting on my email list, but a ton of value in there. So yeah, check it out, justcreative.com.
Oh, amazing. And if you haven't listened to the Just Branding podcast with Jacob and Matt Davies, I highly recommend it. One of my favorite podcasts out there. And for more on the Branders Magazine Talk with Branders podcast, you go to brandersmagazine.com. And for more on me, you can find me in my little piece of home on the internet at stevenpicanza.com. And until next time, everyone, peace.